Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome to a Pro Cycling Manager 2024 request video. For those unfamiliar, this game is Cyanide Studios' first. It was the first one that they put out back in 2000 when they formed as a business, and it has been their every year staple ever since. While they have a small team, most recent estimates have them in the low 100 to 150 stage in how many employees they have. They don't reveal much information publicly. They do work on other titles besides Pro Cycling Manager, but it's their biggest, longest active title. While some upgrades are few and far between with the game, others have come. And actually, my request video from a year ago saw 3 of the requests make it into the game for this year. That being said, we are right in the window. Even though the game came out in June, we're right in the window that they are making the decisions on what goes into the game for next year. In fact, those decisions should be finalized within the next few weeks. So if we're going to get any requests into the game for next year, we got to get through this now. Also, this is going to be a 2-part video. Part 1 is my list, my 10 things that I would like to see in next year's game. Part 2 of the video is going to be your list. Let me know in the comments below what you would like to see beyond what I mention here, but even just follow up to what I'm mentioning within this video. Let me know what you would like to see in Pro Cycling Manager 2024, and if there's enough comments, enough likes on this video, then I will go ahead and follow it up with that part 2 video of what the community would like to see in Pro Cycling Manager 2024. Without further ado, let's go over my list of 10 things I would like to see in Pro Cycling Manager 24. At number 10, we have an equipment revamp. So equipment, of course, is a big part of the game, and this year they added licensed equipment and various things. The game has for a long time had a system of varying profiles of equipment and a research system, but it's never been hugely important to its impact on the game. I'd like to see it have a bigger impact, and I'd like to have a more detailed research system that's going to tell you more about what could happen, have more influence on how it would go. See equipment in general just have a bigger role to play in the game, especially as they're picking up licensing on equipment. It should be important. Coming in at number 9, and this is something I requested a year ago, but it did see a little bit of progression in PCM 23. I'd like to see it take another step and be more dynamic in how it's utilized, but more nations in the World Championships. To also see a Pan-American race, as we already have a Euros. It is a real race that does take place. Would love to see something across more of the more minor nations as well. It's something that the developers wrote in separately, and so modders can't get in and impact this. So at the very least, set it up where modders can, or introduce it yourself. Bring in a more dynamic system, because this year the system was revamped a little bit in the rankings being able to vary. But why is it that I can't take South Africa and turn them into a powerhouse over a matter of years? They should be entered into the Worlds with more than 2 riders. Or Eritrea, who's not on that list at all, should be able to go out and perform, and Benyam Girmay should be able to compete at the World Championships. Number 8, training overhaul. Right now in the game, it's seen a number of overhauls of the system over the years, and it's seen it simplified. I want to see more interaction. I want to have something like what they have in, say, Football Manager, where Sports Interactive brings specific training sessions. Lots of games do this, where you have specific training sessions. But the staff relevance, some of those sessions being locked behind training camps, making training camps more important, and the relationships among staff and athletes, training styles, all of that can come to fruition if we have specific training sessions that are applied. And of course, there's a race calendar. Different athletes are gone at different races where training is still taking place back at your headquarters, and having that continuation and having that be a way to manage the fatigue, recovery of riders, so on and so forth. I would love to see a much more detailed training. Coming in at number 7, this is a big one for me. Right now, the only thing that you have to do in terms of keeping your riders fit over the race is go back and get water once every 60K. And it's a very simplistic motion where they just go back and they raise their hand and then they ride back forward, and then magically everybody has water bottles. I would love to see proper display of that in the graphics in the engine, to where we see the exchange of water bottles, where we see, and in this one, the inclusion of feed zone, where they're going to go and actually collect, it's called a musette, the bags, right, and hand out those materials throughout, or at least something like what they have in the Tour de France game, where they have actual feed zones where you get gels, and those gels are used over time, not all at once necessarily, and actually have an impact on what happens. Here it's just you got to get water, otherwise they're going to go back and get it themselves at some stage if you don't supply them with water at some point. Otherwise there's no impact. Love to see feeding being a more important part of the game, as that's a huge part of the sport in real life. Coming in at number 6 is better sponsor objectives. I'd like to see, for one thing, negotiable objectives being brought back, changing the amount of money you receive, give or take. Now, I know that part of that and why that was settled in was the cap placed upon rider salary. That's something I'd like to see them break away from to an extent, and coming back onto the old system of sponsor objectives with the negotiation of them makes a lot of sense if you do that. That would also mean your July 31st date of signing sponsors also could weigh in a much bigger way than it does currently, where you could have specifics, requirements that they are placing onto the team, their demands for the upcoming year. So you could negotiate some surface objectives, you can have some mandatory objectives, and then you can have a more negotiable set that's kind of up to you, how much you want to commit to and what those expectations are. It would bring a lot more life into your sponsor and your finances if they were to do that. Coming in at number 5 is one that's bigger for some people and not as important for others, but I think that in 2023 it should be mandatory at this stage in time that professional sports that have both men's and women's elite levels, it should be mandatory for developers to have inclusion and bring all parties to the table. Women's cycling is prominent, is growing, and should exist in Pro Cycling Manager. Other major sports titles, sports management titles, have already brought forth women's into their games. It's due, it's time, and we should see it here as well. And for those who aren't interested in it, when you go to start the game, it should just come down to a simple checkbox. You are choosing men's only, women's only, or a combination of both. It would be really cool to have a team that has both a men's and women's program and be able to simultaneously run both. But for those that wouldn't be interested in it, having that simple checkbox of the women's being unchecked and selecting just the men's for your startup, that's all it comes down to. So for those who aren't into it, those who don't particularly care about that inclusion, don't have to. Coming in at number 4 is revamping the signing period. And this is actually a simple one that would totally change the system as it is now in a good way, making it more realistic. Because as it is right now in game, August 1st, you can do all of your business on that same day before anybody else has. So you get first pick of the entire pool of expired contracts. The simple change that I'm looking for is that you get 10 points on August 1st. That's it. 10 points. Right now you get 60 points. Now you'd only get 10. And then every day from August 2nd on, you add one more point. Eventually, you get to 60, and it ends there. The system ends up being the exact same. However, it ends up taking 50 further days to get to that point. That forces you to prioritize who you speak with, when you speak with them. And now you have to sign contract by contract by contract, and all at once. And that forced prioritization makes the signing much more dynamic, makes it much more important, and puts you in a position where you might lose some of those riders out to other teams. That's how a real transfer market works. You shouldn't have access to literally everyone prior to everyone else. Sure, it's convenient, but it's not realistic. In at number 3 is a facilities section. Right now, we don't even have anything for it. Sports management titles, 99% of them have something regarding development of facilities. The teams around the world have varied facilities. Some have next to nothing. Some have absolute world-class facilities like Jumbo-Visma. Introducing a 3D dynamic facility, for one thing, would really improve the immersion of the game. For another, with upgradable facilities, there are perks, there are things to be had from having that can impact the gameplay, that can make life more difficult on a continental team trying to compete with a World Tour team, and the facilities that they have versus what you have, and the perks that come from having those facilities, from improved training to decreased costs in travel, or improvement to stamina, like temporary boosts that you would have, where riders can go out and perform a little bit better because they're coming in with a little bit better fitness regime, or they're coming in with better night's rest. And that leads right into number 2 on my list, which is a financial management revamp. Right now, the game is very, very simplistic on how the finances are set up. And really, the only 2 numbers that matter in regards to finances is 1, your maximum rider salary, and not exceeding that and coming right up to it. And 2, making sure that you don't get to a negative balance. That's it. That's all finances do these days. They are super simple. I would love to see a much, much more detailed financial system. It's going to take some work to hash out how you do that, but it's all doable. It's all quite doable. Most sports management games do something along these lines of detailed finances. Things that you could include in the detailed finances. For one thing, those facilities, the costs of those facilities, potential income from those facilities, your sponsor income, of course, being broken down in a different manner than they are now, of here's the money you have to work with, now make it work. But travel is a huge part of the sport. You travel with team cars. You only have so many team cars to distribute on your calendar. Distribution of riders to various races, for a lot of teams, this happens in a cyclical type of way. You have 4 races over a week in, say, France. You're going to send the same riders to those 4 races because you can't afford to fly here, there, and everywhere and take a different team to all 4 races. The cost would be absurd. So you bring the same riders. Well, now you have choices to make on who you're selecting. Otherwise, you're going to have drastically increased costs. If you're dealing with a budget, you're now going to have tougher choices to make. Of course, hotel stay could all impact things like your race day condition or your stamina. It can feed into the gameplay by making difficult decisions. Do you stay at 1-star hotels and save a ton of money, but come into the race the next day tired and therefore have a -1? Or do you stay at a 5-star and everybody on your team's getting a +2 to their race day condition? It's the Tour de France and you're desperate to win and you commit all your resources to that one, but you back off in other races to save the money because you have a limited budget. It provides so much more immersion into the gameplay if you have the element of choice. And that element of choice comes with consequences. And those consequences put you into decisions that have to be made. Before we get to number 1 on the list, I want to go over a few honorable mentions that didn't make the list this year, but easily could have, and could make your list. Remember to drop below, leave a like, and comment on what it is you would like to see in Pro Cycling Manager 24. Those honorable mentions, merging Tour de France and Pro Cycling Manager. 2 separate titles that offer something really unique and awesome would be the perfect title if combined. Cyclocross, Great sport, absolutely cycling. A lot of the same riders are there. I would love to see a version or mode of the game, or even immersed in the larger game itself, but probably as a separate mode. Cyclocross would be a fantastic addition. Sprint maps. Sprint maps provided in the same way that you have the climb maps that pop up. Why isn't there a top-down 2D sprint map? It is a simple addition to the game. For all intermediate and final sprints, we should know what sort of profile we are dealing with. How technical is it? It impacts the sprint greatly. Why don't we have them already? Final honorable mention is sprint crashes. Crashes are already a part of the game. One of the most common places to see a crash in real life is on final sprints. Everybody's giving it their all, and they are fighting for positions. We have life-altering crashes that happen in real life, and yet the game doesn't experience them. Why not? We should have crashes in the sprints. Coming in at number 1 is the upgraded engine. The engine that the game uses right now for graphics. It's been over a decade since they implemented it. It's massively overdue. Now this one obviously comes back down to the size of the team. Overall, Cyanide have more than enough employees to do this, but they continually take their cash cow in Pro Cycling Manager, the game that has been its staple, that brings a lot of money, that has a very small element of that larger Cyanide team, and that smaller team has to continually pump out new edition after new edition, year after year. That team also overlaps with that Tour de France team for the most part, and makes a slightly larger team. At the very least, we should see an engine that they use for Tour de France into the Pro Cycling Manager title, at the very least, though I think they could certainly do one better. We're in a new era of developer tools for new engines, and we're seeing rapidly across the board title after title that has done something similar, that has a yearly release, come out with new, or in the near future coming out with new engines. It's time to upgrade the engine for Pro Cycling Manager as well. Long overdue. Time is right. So I'd love to see that in Pro Cycling Manager 24. That's going to do it for this video. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thank you for tuning into this one. Like I said before, please drop below, leave a like, and comment on what it is you would like to see, as I will have a follow-up video for this one, as long as there's enough of you commenting on this, what your requests are for Pro Cycling Manager 24. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.